He fixed engines by day, but when she signed the marriage papers, she didn't know she'd just married the heir to a billion-dollar empire. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this unforgettable story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll bring you another incredible tale you absolutely can't miss. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and share to help our community grow. The fluorescent lights of Morrison's diner hummed overhead as Amora Bennett refilled the coffee pot for the 6th time that morning. At 28, she'd mastered the art of balancing 3 plates on one arm, remembering complicated orders without writing them down, and smiling through the exhaustion that came with working double shifts. Her dark skin glowed with a thin sheen of perspiration, her natural curls pulled back into a practical bun that had started neat at 5 a.m. but had slowly rebelled throughout the day. "Coffee, hun?" she asked the man in booth 7, her voice carrying that particular melody of someone who'd learned to be pleasant even when her feet screamed for mercy. He looked up from the engine manual spread across the table, and Amora felt something shift in the air between them. He wasn't conventionally handsome, his face was too angular, his nose slightly crooked as if it had been broken once, his sandy-brown hair perpetually messy. But his eyes, a startling shade of grey-blue, held something rare, genuine warmth without expectation. "Please," he said, and his smile transformed his entire face. "And maybe your opinion on something." Amora raised an eyebrow, pot poised. "My opinion comes free with the coffee. Can't guarantee it's worth anything." He turned the manual toward her, pointing to a diagram of engine components. "Would you trust a mechanic who suggests replacing the whole transmission, or one who says he can rebuild it for half the cost?" She studied the page, then studied him. His hands were calloused, nails permanently lined with the shadow of grease that no amount of scrubbing could fully erase. His t-shirt, though clean, was worn soft with age, the logo of Pete's Auto Repair faded across the chest. "The honest one who tells me what I actually need, not what makes him the most money," Amora said, pouring his coffee. "Though in my experience, that's like finding a unicorn." "Ethan Wright," he said, extending one of those honest, stained hands. "And I promise, I'm the unicorn who tells you the truth." She shook it, feeling the rough warmth of his palm. "Amora. And I'll believe that when I see it." That was how it started, not with fireworks or dramatic declarations, but with coffee and conversation about carburetors. Ethan became a regular fixture in booth 7, always during Amora's shifts. She learned he worked at Pete's garage 3 blocks over, that he rented a small apartment above a laundromat, that he read voraciously and had opinions on everything from classic novels to the best way to make scrambled eggs. "You're weird," she told him one evening as October rain drummed against the diner windows. "Most guys try to impress with how much money they make or what car they drive." Ethan glanced up from his book, a battered copy of East of Eden, and shrugged. "I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck with a dent in the passenger door, and I make enough to pay rent and buy books. Not exactly impressive." "It is to me," Amora said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty. She dated before, men who talked big about their futures, their plans, their importance. Men who looked at her like she should be grateful for their attention, who made her feel small in ways both subtle and obvious. Men who disappeared when they realized she wasn't going to be anyone's trophy or stepping stone. Ethan looked at her like she was already complete. Their first real date was to a free concert in Riverside Park, where a local jazz band played under string lights and the city lights reflected on the water. Amora wore her favorite yellow sundress, the one she'd found at a consignment shop and altered herself. Ethan showed up in clean jeans and a button-down shirt that was definitely not from this decade, but he tried, and that mattered. "I should tell you," he said as they found a spot on the grass, his voice nervous in a way she'd never heard before, I don't come from much. I know you work hard, and you've got your life figured out, and I'm just a mechanic who—" "Ethan." She put her hand over his, feeling the familiar roughness of his knuckles. "I don't care about where you come from. I care about where you're going. Who you are right now." His expression shifted, relief mixed with something deeper, something that looked almost like pain. "You mean that?" "Every word." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. The jazz band played What a Wonderful World, and for the first time in years, Amora believed it might actually be true. The months that followed were a masterclass in simple joy. Ethan taught her about cars, how to change her own oil, how to listen to an engine and hear what it needed. She taught him to cook her grandmother's recipes, measuring love in cups of patience and tablespoons of laughter. They explored the city like tourists in their own home, finding hole-in-the-wall restaurants and used bookstores, building a life from thrift store furniture and shared dreams. "What do you want?" Amora asked one night as they lay on his worn couch, her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? His hand traced lazy circles on her shoulder. "Here. With you. Maybe a better apartment, maybe our own place. Kids, eventually, if you want them. Nothing fancy. Just real." "Just real," she echoed, and felt tears prick her eyes because it was everything she'd ever wanted and nothing she'd expected to find. When Ethan proposed 6 months later, it was in the diner where they'd met, Booth 7, naturally. He'd arranged with her manager to let him wait there until the end of her shift, and when the last customer filed out and Amora turned to tell him they were closing, he was on one knee with a simple silver band. "It's not much," he said, and his voice cracked. "But it's honest. Like us. Amora Bennett, will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that the best things in life aren't things at all?" She said yes through tears and laughter, and they kissed in the empty diner while the jukebox played an old Aretha Franklin song and the night shift cook whistled from the kitchen. They were married 3 weeks later at City Hall, with just 2 friends as witnesses. Amora wore a cream-colored dress she'd found at a vintage shop for $40, and Ethan wore a suit borrowed from Pete, his boss. There were no fancy cars, no elaborate receptions, no expensive photographer. Just 2 people promising forever in the simplest, most honest way possible. That night, in Ethan's tiny apartment that was now theirs, Amora looked at the man she'd married, still in the borrowed suit, his hair mussed from her fingers, his smile wider than she'd ever seen it, and felt completely, perfectly wealthy. She had no idea that wealth had a very different definition coming for them both. The first 3 months of marriage were a study in beautiful simplicity. Amora and Ethan fell into rhythms that felt ancient and new all at once. Morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, her feet in his lap while they read on opposite ends of their second-hand couch, the way he always saved to the last bite of dessert, the way she always pretended not to notice. Their apartment above the laundromat wasn't much. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in, a living room where the radiator clanked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. But they'd made it theirs. Amora's grandmother's quilt draped over the couch. Ethan's growing collection of salvaged car parts that he swore he'd use someday lined up on a shelf. Plants that Amora couldn't quite keep alive clustered on the windowsill, testament to her optimism if not her green thumb. "You know what I love about this place," Ethan said one Sunday morning, pulling her closer as they watched the sunrise paint their bedroom walls gold. "The water pressure," Amora teased. "Because it's terrible." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I love that it's ours. That we built it with our own hands, our own money. That no one can take it from us because we earned every single thing in it." Something in his voice made Amora pull back to look at him. "Ethan, you okay?" He kissed her forehead, and she felt him smile against her skin. "More than okay. I'm home." But the universe, Amora would later reflect, had a cruel sense of timing. It started small, little discrepancies she might have noticed sooner if she hadn't been so wrapped up in the glow of newlywed bliss. The first was the phone call Ethan received while they were grocery shopping, carefully comparing prices on pasta brands. His phone rang, not the battered smartphone with the cracked screen he usually carried, but a different phone, sleek and expensive-looking, that he pulled from his jacket pocket like a dirty secret. "I have to take this," he said, his face going pale. "I'll meet you at checkout." He was gone for 15 minutes. When he returned, his jaw was tight, his eyes distant. "Everything okay?" Amora asked, watching him carefully place the expensive phone back in his pocket, separate from his regular one. "Work stuff. Pete's dealing with a difficult supplier." The lie sat between them like something with weight and shape. Ethan had never been good at lying. His left eye twitched when he did it, a tell he didn't know he had. Amora decided to let it go. Everyone had their secrets, their complications. She had her own, credit card debt from her mother's medical bills, a falling out with her sister she'd never fully explained. Marriage was trust, and she trusted Ethan. The second discrepancy came 2 weeks later. Amora had been folding laundry, Ethan's jeans, the ones he wore to the garage every day, permanently stained despite her best efforts. Something fell from the pocket, a business card, thick and expensive, the kind of cardstock that whispered money. She picked it up. Wright Industries Theodore Wright, CEO building tomorrow's infrastructure today. Below it, a handwritten note in elegant script, Ethan, please call Dad. Amora stood in their tiny bedroom, holding the card like it might explode. Wright. Ethan's last name was Wright, but he told her he didn't have family, that he'd grown up in foster care, aged out of the system at 18, made his own way in the world. It was one of the things that had bonded them. Amora's own family was small and fractured, her mother gone, her father a ghost of memory. She heard the apartment door open, Ethan's familiar footsteps. Hey, babe, I picked up Thai food from... He stopped when he saw her face, saw the card in her hand. Amora. Who's Theodore Wright? Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, she saw something she'd never seen before, fear. Can we sit down? I'd rather stand. The card felt heavy as a stone. Who is Theodore Wright? My father. The words came out barely above a whisper. You told me you didn't have family. I don't. Not really. I mean, Ethan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she recognized. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Amora's nursing training kicked in, the same calm she used with panicked patients, even as her own heart raced. Start with the truth. Ethan sank onto the couch, and she watched her husband transform into a stranger. His shoulders curved inward, his hands clasped between his knees, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years. Theodore Wright owns Wright Industries. It's a multi-billion-dollar construction and infrastructure empire. He built it from nothing, and it consumed everything, his marriage, his relationship with me, any pretense of a normal life. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes pleading. I grew up in that world. Amora. Private schools, drivers, houses so big you could get lost in them. And I hated every second of it. The room tilted slightly. Amora gripped the back of their worn armchair. You're lying. I'm not. I wish I was. He stood, moving toward her, but stopped when she held up a hand. When I turned 21, I walked away. Told my father I wanted nothing to do with his money or his company. I changed everything about how I lived, got a job at Pete's, rented the cheapest place I could find, learned to live on what I actually earned. I wanted to know who I was without all that weight, all those expectations. And you didn't think to mention this? Before we got married. Amora's voice cracked on the last word. That you're some, what, billionaire in disguise. I'm not a billionaire. I'm a mechanic. Ethan took a step closer. Everything I've shown you, everything we've built, that's real. That's who I actually am. But it's not the truth. The words exploded out of her. You lied to me, Ethan. Every single day, you lied. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you about a life I'm not living anymore. That's the same thing. Amora pressed her hands to her temples, trying to process. What else? What else haven't you told me? Ethan's silence was damning. Oh my God. Amora's laugh was bitter. There's more. My father's been trying to get me back. He's sick, heart problems. He wants me to take over the company. Ethan's words tumbled out faster now. That's what the calls have been about. That's why he keeps finding me, even though I've moved 6 times in 8 years. He has people who track me, who report back to him. And now that I'm married, he wants to meet you. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Meet me. He knows about you. About us. Ethan's face was anguished. Amora, I'm sorry. I never wanted you dragged into this. I thought I could keep those worlds separate, keep you safe from all of it. Safe. Amora's voice rose. You kept me ignorant. There's a difference. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. I need air. Amora, please. Don't. She held up a hand, tears threatening. I need to think. I need to not look at you right now. She was out the door before he could respond, taking the stairs 2 at a time, bursting onto the street where the evening air hit her like a slap. Her mind spun with images that didn't fit together. Ethan in grease-stained coveralls and Ethan in some mansion. Ethan carefully budgeting their grocery money and Ethan with access to billions. The man she'd married and this stranger she'd apparently never known. Amora walked without destination, her feet carrying her through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. She passed Morrison's diner, the place where they'd met, where she'd fallen for a man with honest hands and humble dreams. Had any of it been real? Or had she been some kind of project, a test to see if he could really live like a normal person? Her phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. She declined the call. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, a text. I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, just know that everything between us, every moment, every feeling, that was real. That is real. I love you, Amora. That's the only truth that matters. Amora stood under streetlight, reading the message 3 times, and felt something crack open in her chest. Because she believed him, that was the terrible, complicated truth. She believed that Ethan loved her. But love built on deception, no matter how well-intentioned, was like a house with a cracked foundation. It might stand for a while, but eventually, inevitably, it would fall. She typed back, I need time. His response came instantly, take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as Amora made her way to her friend Jasmine's apartment, needing a neutral space to fall apart, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She turned twice, scanning the street, but saw nothing unusual. Just her imagination, probably. Just paranoia brought on by the revelation that her husband had been living a double life. Just the black Mercedes sedan that had been parked across from their building for the past 3 days, its driver reading a newspaper, occasionally lifting a phone to his ear. Just the first tremor before the earthquake that would shake apart everything Amora thought she knew about the man she'd married, the life they'd built, and the fortune that was waiting in the shadows to either save them or destroy them completely. Amora spent 3 nights at Jasmine's apartment. 3 nights of tear-stained conversations, untouched pizza, and staring at her phone waiting for courage or clarity, whichever came first. Jasmine, her best friend since nursing school, listened without judgment, offering tissues and wine in equal measure. So your broke mechanic husband is actually rich as hell, Jasmine said on the 3rd night, painting her nails a defiant shade of crimson. Girl, some women would call that a lottery ticket. Those women can have him. Amora was curled into the corner of Jasmine's couch, wearing the same hoodie for the 2nd day. It's not about the money, Jazz. It's about the lie. How do I trust anything now? Do you still love him? The question hung in the air. Amora closed her eyes and saw Ethan, not the secret billionaire, but her Ethan. The man who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it. Who read poetry aloud while she fell asleep. Who cried during animal rescue commercials and pretended he wasn't. Who looked at her like she'd hung every star in the sky. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. Then maybe you need to hear his side. All of it. Jasmine blew on her nails. Not saying you have to forgive him. But understanding might help. Amora's phone buzzed. Another text from Ethan. He'd been sending them regularly, never demanding, just small updates. Fixed Mrs. Chen's car today. She asked about you. I didn't know what to say. Then, the apartment feels too big without you. Funny, considering how small it actually is. And, I'm reading that book you recommended. You were right. The ending destroyed me. Each message was a small crack in her armor. On the 4th morning, Amora made her decision. She texted, I'm coming home. We need to talk. Really talk. His response came in seconds. I'll be here. Thank you. The apartment looked the same but felt different when Amora walked in that afternoon. Ethan was sitting at their tiny kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee already poured, hers with cream and honey, his black. His eyes were shadowed with sleeplessness, his jaw rough with stubble. He stood when she entered, uncertain. Hi, he said softly.
Hi.
Amora set down her bag but didn't sit. I need you to tell me everything. No editing, no protecting me from the difficult parts. Everything. Ethan nodded. Okay. Yes. Everything. They sat across from each other, and Ethan began to talk. He told her about growing up as Theodore Wright's only son, about a childhood defined by absence, a father who was always at the office, always on a call, always choosing the company over his family. About his mother, Caroline, who'd loved his father desperately but had been slowly erased by loneliness, who'd eventually left when Ethan was 16, moving to France and starting a new life without the right name. I don't blame her, Ethan said, his voice hollow. She lasted longer than most would have. But it left me alone with him, in that massive house with its 30 rooms and not a single place that felt like home. He told her about the expectations, that he'd go to Harvard Business School, that he'd join the company, that he'd eventually take over the empire his father had built. About being paraded at charity galas and board meetings, a puppet prince for Wright Industries. I tried, Ethan said, his hands wrapped around his mug. For years, I tried to be what he wanted. I went to the right schools, said the right things, dated the women he approved of, daughters of other CEOs, girls who understood the game. And I was miserable every single second. What changed? Amora asked quietly. My best friend from high school, Marcus. Ethan's face shifted with old grief. He was my driver's son. We grew up together, even though we came from completely different worlds. The only real friend I had. When we were 20, he was diagnosed with leukemia. Aggressive. He needed treatment that his family couldn't afford, and I went to my father, begged him to help. Amora's chest tightened. Did he? He offered Marcus a job. Said if he worked for Wright Industries for 5 years, the company insurance would cover the treatment. Ethan's voice broke. But the job was 80 hours a week, impossible for someone going through chemo. It was a test, Amora. My father was testing whether Marcus was strong enough to deserve help. Marcus died 6 months later, and my father called it unfortunate but inevitable. Jesus, Amora breathed. That's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be part of a world where people were commodities, where wealth determined worth. So on my 21st birthday, I told my father I was done. He laughed, thought I'd come crawling back within a month. Ethan met her eyes. I've been gone for 8 years. I've never touched a cent of his money. Everything I have, I earned with these hands. He held them up, scarred and honest. And then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Tears streaked down Amora's face. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I would have understood. Because I was afraid. Ethan's voice cracked. Afraid you'd look at me differently. Afraid you'd think I was slumming it, playing poor. Afraid that knowing would change the way you loved me, and Amora, the way you loved me, like I was enough exactly as I was, that saved my life. The silence between them was heavy with truth. I hate that you lied, Amora said finally. But I understand why you did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What happens now? She wiped her eyes. Your father wants to meet me. Ethan nodded grimly. He's been calling constantly. Says it's urgent, his health is deteriorating, and he wants to put his affairs in order. He wants me to come home, take over the company. And he wants to meet the woman who domesticated me. His words, not mine. Charming. He's not a warm person, Amora. He's calculating, controlling, and he sees people as assets or liabilities. I need you to know that before you decide whether I'm going with you. The word surprised even Amora, but once spoken, she knew they were right. If we're going to make this marriage work, I need to see all of you, even the parts you ran away from. Ethan looked at her with such naked hope it nearly broke her heart. You still want to make this work? I didn't say that. Amora's voice was firm. I said I'm going with you to meet your father. After that, we'll see. You lied to me, Ethan. That doesn't just disappear because I understand the why. Fair enough. He reached across the table, palm up, an offering. Whatever you need. However long it takes. Amora looked at his hand, those familiar calluses, that honest warmth, and after a moment's hesitation, placed hers in it. The call was made that evening. Theodore Wright's assistant, a crisp-voiced woman named Patricia, informed them that a car would arrive at 9 a.m. the following Saturday to bring them to the Wright estate. The Wright estate, Amora repeated after Ethan hung up. Of course he has an estate. 45 acres in Greenwood Hills, Ethan said miserably. 12 bedrooms, indoor pool, tennis courts, a garage with 17 cars. It's obscene. Amora thought of their one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat and felt vertigo. What do I wear to meet a billionaire? Whatever you want. You're beautiful in everything. That's not helpful. Jasmine, when consulted via frantic phone call, was more practical. You wear armor, honey. Something that makes you feel powerful. This man tried to let someone die to prove a point. You're going into battle, not brunch. On Saturday morning, Amora stood in front of their small closet, finally selecting a deep emerald dress she'd worn to a work gala. Elegant but not trying too hard, professional but distinctly her own style. She twisted her natural hair into an updo that showed off her grandmother's pearl earrings, the only expensive things she owned. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman ready for war. Ethan emerged from the bathroom in a suit she'd never seen, charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, clearly expensive. He caught her looking. It was custom-made when I was 20, he explained. Only thing I kept from that life. I thought I might need it someday for job interviews or, he gestured vaguely, whatever this is. You look like a stranger, Amora said quietly. I feel like one. He adjusted his tie with fingers that trembled slightly. We can still cancel. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. At precisely 9 a.m., a black Mercedes pulled up outside their building, the same one Amora had noticed before, she realized with a chill. A driver in full uniform emerged and opened the rear door without a word. The drive to Greenwood Hills took 45 minutes, the city gradually giving way to manicured suburbs and then to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Amora watched the wealth accumulate like a physical thing, each property larger than the last, each more ostentatious. She felt Ethan's tension in the rigid way he held himself, the muscle jumping in his jaw. You okay? She asked. No. His honesty was stark. I haven't been back here in 8 years. I swore I never would. We're doing this together. She squeezed his hand, and he held on like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. The Wright estate appeared behind gates that slowly rolled open, wrought iron, topped with gold leaf in a pattern that incorporated the Wright Industries logo. The driveway alone was longer than the street Amora had grown up on, winding through perfectly landscaped grounds where every tree looked expensive and every flower bed appeared designed by committee. The house, no, the mansion, loomed ahead, all stone and glass and sharp angles that suggested power rather than warmth. Windows gleamed like accusatory eyes. Columns flanked the entrance like sentries. Home sweet home, Ethan muttered bitterly. The driver opened their door. A woman in her 50s, blonde and professionally pleasant, waited at the entrance. Mr. Wright, welcome home. Your father is waiting in his study. And you must be Mrs. Wright. Her smile at Amora was polite but assessing, taking in every detail. Patricia Maxwell, Mr. Wright Sr.'s executive assistant. This way, please. They followed her through a foyer that could have housed Amora's entire apartment, past artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced Wright ancestors. Everything was pristine, cold, elegant in a way that felt hostile. Patricia stopped at a heavy oak door. Please wait here. He'll see you momentarily. She knocked twice and entered, leaving them in the hallway. Ethan's breathing had gone shallow. Amora, if he says anything, that hurts you, we leave. Immediately. I don't care if. The door opened. Patricia nodded them inside. The study was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with first editions. A massive desk that suggested kingdoms had been ruled from behind it. And in a leather chair near the window, a man who looked like an older, harder version of Ethan, same grey-blue eyes, same angular features, but with all the warmth burned away. Theodore Wright rose slowly, and Amora noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the careful way he moved, signs of illness carefully controlled. He was tall, imposing despite his obvious frailty, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car. His gaze moved over Ethan with something that might have been affection in anyone else but in him looked like inventory assessment. Then those cold eyes landed on Amora, and she felt stripped to her bones. So, Theodore Wright said, his voice carrying the weight of boardrooms and broken competitors, you're the waitress who convinced my son that poverty was a virtue. What would you do if you discovered the person you loved had hidden $1 billion secret? Would truth or love matter more? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your take. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Amora realized with crystal clarity that she wasn't just meeting her father-in-law. She was facing the reason Ethan had run, the embodiment of everything he'd rejected, and the man who could destroy their fragile marriage with a few well-chosen words. The study felt smaller suddenly, despite its grand dimensions. Theodore Wright's words echoed off the expensive walls, the waitress who convinced my son that poverty was a virtue, and Amora felt every syllable designed to diminish her. I'm a nurse, she corrected calmly, refusing to drop his gaze. The diner is my second job. And I didn't convince your son of anything. He made his own choices. Something flickered in Theodore's eyes. Surprise, maybe respect. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Sit. We're fine standing, Ethan said coldly. You wanted to meet Amora. You've met her. We're done here. I didn't drive you across town for a 30-second introduction, Ethan. Theodore lowered himself carefully back into his chair. I have something to discuss with both of you. Now sit down, or I'll have Patricia escort you out and you'll never know what you came here to hear. Ethan's jaw clenched, but Amora touched his arm. They sat a day. Theodore opened a folder on his desk, expensive reading glasses perched on his nose. I've had my people run a thorough background check on you, Mrs. Wright. I hope you don't mind. I absolutely mind, Amora said evenly. But I doubt my opinion factors into your decision-making. A ghost of a smile touched Theodore's lips. Smart. Good. My son always was attracted to intelligence. He pushed a document across the desk. You work at Mercy General Hospital, Pediatric Ward. Excellent performance reviews. You're carrying $47,000 in medical debt from your mother's cancer treatment before she passed. You send money every month to your younger brother who's finishing community college. You volunteer at a women's shelter twice a month. You've never been arrested, never defaulted on a loan, never even gotten a parking ticket. Amora felt violated, her entire life reduced to bullet points in a folder. Is this the part where you tell me I'm not good enough for your son? Quite the opposite. Theodore closed the folder. You're exactly what he needs. Grounded, practical, honest. Unlike the parade of social climbers and daddy's girls I paraded in front of him for years. Then what is this? Ethan demanded. If you approve so much, why drag us here? Why the investigation? Theodore's expression hardened. Because I'm dying. The words dropped like stones. Even knowing they were coming, Ethan had mentioned his father's health. The bald statement changed the air in the room. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8. My heart is failing, has been for 2 years now. I need to know that Wright Industries will survive me. He looked at Ethan with something that might have been longing buried under layers of control. I need you to come home. No. Ethan's response was immediate. We've been through this. Hear me out. Theodore held up a hand. I'm not asking you to become me. I'm asking you to save what I built. The company employs 15,000 people, Ethan. 15,000 families who depend on Wright Industries for their livelihoods. If you don't take over, the board will sell it off piece by piece. Those people will lose everything. Hire a CEO. Plenty of qualified people would. None of them are Wrights. Theodore's voice turned sharp. This is a family company. It has been for 3 generations. The board, the investors, they need stability, continuity. They need a Wright at the helm or they'll panic and liquidate. That sounds like your problem, not mine. It's Amora's problem too. Theodore turned his cold gaze on her. That medical debt you're carrying? I can make it disappear. Your brother's tuition? Paid in full. The women's shelter you volunteer at, the one that's about to lose its funding and shut down? I can write a check today that keeps it open for the next 20 years. Amora's stomach dropped. You're bribing me. I'm offering you resources to help people you care about. Call it what you want. Theodore leaned back. Or you can keep struggling, keep working yourself to exhaustion at 2 jobs, keep watching your brother take on more debt, keep volunteering at a shelter that won't exist in 3 months. You manipulative. Ethan started to rise, but Amora grabbed his arm. What exactly are you proposing? She asked Theodore, hating herself for even engaging but unable to ignore the lives that hung in the balance. Ethan takes over as CEO of Wright Industries. You both move into this house, there's plenty of room, and you'd have the entire West Wing to yourselves. In exchange, I settle Amora's debts, support her family, and establish a foundation in her name to fund the causes she cares about. You'd have access to resources that could change hundreds of lives. And Ethan becomes you, Amora said flatly, chained to a company that consumed his childhood. No. Theodore's voice softened fractionally. He becomes better than me. He brings something I never had, humanity. Compassion. The ability to see employees as people, not assets. Wright Industries could be more than what I made it. Under Ethan, it could actually do good in the world. The words hung there, tempting and terrible. Ethan stood abruptly. We need to discuss this. Alone. Take your time. Theodore waved them toward the door. Patricia will show you to the garden. It's private there. The garden was as immaculate as everything else. Roses in geometric perfection, a fountain that probably cost more than a small house, paths lined with imported stone. Amora walked without seeing any of it, her mind spinning. No, Ethan said before she could speak. Absolutely not. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. 15,000 people, Ethan. He's manipulating you. Can't you see that? He finds the exact pressure points, your debt, your brother, the shelter, and pushes until you feel like you have no choice. But what if he's right? Amora turned to face him. What if you could actually change things? Make the company into something better? At what cost? Ethan's voice rose. I'd become him, Amora. Maybe not immediately, maybe not intentionally, but that world, it corrupts everything it touches. I've seen it. I lived it. It would destroy me, and eventually, it would destroy us. Or it would give us the power to actually help people. Amora felt tears threaten. Do you know what I could do with those resources? The lives I could change? That shelter has 12 women and 23 children who will have nowhere to go when it closes. My brother is working 3 jobs and barely sleeping. And I'm drowning, Ethan. I'm drowning in debt and exhaustion, and I'm so tired of pretending I'm not. The admission hung between them, raw and ugly. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan asked quietly. Because you married a woman who had her life together. Independent. Strong. Not someone who's barely keeping her head above water. Amora's voice broke. I didn't want you to see me as another problem to solve. Amora. Ethan pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him. You're not a problem. You're my partner. If I'd known you were struggling, you would have tried to fix it. With what money, Ethan? You're a mechanic. I'm a nurse. This is just our reality. It doesn't have to be. His voice was muffled against her hair. God, I hate that is right. I hate that he knew exactly what to offer to make this impossible to refuse. They stood there in the obscenely beautiful garden, holding each other while the world tilted on its axis. What do we do? Amora finally asked. I don't know. Ethan pulled back to look at her. But whatever we decide together. No more secrets, no more protecting each other from hard truths. Full partnership. Full partnership, Amora agreed. They walked the garden paths for an hour, talking through scenarios, weighing options, circling the impossible choice. Take Theodore's offer and gain the resources to help countless people, but risk losing themselves in the process. Refuse and maintain their integrity, but carry the weight of lives they could have saved. Finally, as the sun began to set behind the mansion's sharp silhouette, they reached a decision. They found Theodore in his study, exactly where they'd left him, as if he'd known they'd return. We have conditions, Ethan said without preamble. Theodore's expression didn't change. I'm listening. First, I run the company my way. You advise, you guide, but you don't control. If I'm going to do this, it's because I believe I can actually make Wright Industries into something worth preserving. Agreed. Second, Amora's debts are paid, her brother's education is funded, and the shelter receives its endowment. All of that happens before I sign anything. Legally binding, non-contingent on my performance. Done. Third, Ethan took Amora's hand. We keep our apartment. We'll work from here, we'll do what needs to be done, but we don't move in. Our home stays our home. Our marriage doesn't become part of this empire. Theodore was quiet for a long moment. That's not practical. The CEO of Wright Industries needs to be available. Then you'll have to settle for impractical, Ethan interrupted. Those are our terms. All of them, or none of this happens. Father and son stared at each other, 2 versions of the same stubborn will colliding. Finally, Theodore nodded. Very well. Patricia will have the contracts drawn up. You can review them with your own attorney before signing. We will. Ethan turned toward the door, then stopped. And Dad? This doesn't mean we're okay. This doesn't erase the past or fix what's broken between us. I'm doing this for the people who depend on Wright Industries, and because Amora and I agreed it's worth trying. But I'm not coming home. I'm just coming to work. Something flickered across Theodore's face. Pain, perhaps, or regret. I understand. As they walked back through the mansion, past the cold opulence and stern portraits, Amora felt the weight of what they just agreed to. They'd made a deal with the devil, or at least his close relative, trading their simple life for the chance to do real good in the world. Are we doing the right thing? She asked as they climbed back into the Mercedes. Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat. I have no idea. But we're doing it together. The car pulled away from the Wright estate, and Amora watched the mansion shrink in the rearview mirror, a monument to wealth and power and everything Ethan had run from. They were heading back to their tiny apartment above the laundromat, but she knew nothing would ever be quite the same. The question wasn't whether they'd changed by accepting Theodore's offer. The question was whether they'd still recognize themselves when the transformation was complete. The transition happened faster than Amora expected, like being caught in a riptide. 1 week they were eating ramen and budgeting for groceries. The next, Theodore's attorneys were presenting them with contracts so thick they required their own briefcase. Amora insisted they hire their own lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen who specialized in corporate law and had a reputation for protecting her clients from predatory deals. Rebecca spent 3 days reviewing every clause, every contingency, every potential trap hidden in the legal language. He's actually being fair, Rebecca said, looking almost disappointed. Surprisingly so. Your debts will be cleared before Ethan signs anything. Your brother's educational trust is ironclad and can't be revoked. The shelter's endowment is protected in perpetuity. And there's a performance clause that works in your favor. If Ethan makes a good faith effort to run the company ethically and the board tries to remove him, he gets a severance package that would set you both up for life. What's the catch? Ethan asked, because there was always a catch with Theodore. The catch is that he actually seems to want you to succeed. These contracts are designed to protect you, not trap you. Rebecca shrugged. Maybe he's genuine about wanting to change the company's legacy. Or maybe he's just a very smart manipulator who knows the best cage is one that doesn't look like a cage. Either way, the terms are solid. If you're going to do this, these contracts won't be the thing that destroys you. They signed on a Tuesday morning in Theodore's study, Patricia and Rebecca as witnesses. Theodore's hand shook slightly as he countersigned, his illness more visible than before. For just a moment, Amora saw him not as the cold billionaire but as a dying man trying to make peace with his choices. Welcome to Wright Industries, son, Theodore said, and there was something raw in his voice that made Ethan's jaw tighten. Let's be clear, Ethan replied. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this despite you. Theodore nodded slowly. I know. But I'll take what I can get. The announcement hit the business world like a bomb. Wright Industries' heir apparent emerges after 8-year absence. The press went wild. Where had Ethan been? Why had he disappeared? Who was this mysterious wife who'd convinced him to return? Amora's photo appeared in business magazines and gossip blogs, alongside speculation about her humble background and Cinderella story. The comments ranged from supportive to vicious, with a particularly ugly strain focusing on her race, her profession, her obvious gold digging. Don't read them, Jasmine advised, finding Amora scrolling through her phone at 2 a.m., tears streaming down her face. Those trolls don't know you. They don't know your life. They're calling me a diversity hire. Saying Ethan married down. That I trapped him. Amora's voice was hollow. Maybe they're right. Stop. Jasmine grabbed the phone. You fell in love with a man you thought was a broke mechanic. You literally could not have been less interested in his money because you didn't know it existed. That's the opposite of gold digging, you beautiful idiot. But the damage was done. Amora felt exposed, dissected by strangers who decided her worth based on headlines and assumptions. Ethan fared no better. The business press questioned his qualifications. What did a mechanic know about running a multi-billion-dollar corporation? The board members Theodore introduced them to wore polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, assessing Ethan like a stock they weren't sure was worth the investment. He's Theodore's son, but does he have Theodore's killer instinct? One board member, a silver-haired vulture named Harrison Blackwell, said during what was supposed to be a friendly dinner. Wright Industries didn't become an empire by being nice. Maybe it's time it tried, Ethan replied evenly. Harrison laughed like he'd told a joke. The real test came 3 weeks into the transition. Wright Industries had a contract to build a new commercial complex in a neighborhood called Riverside, the same neighborhood where Amora had grown up, where her grandmother's church still stood, where families struggled to hold onto homes as developers circled like sharks. The Riverside project is our biggest development this year, Theodore explained, pulling up architectural renderings. Mixed-use commercial space, high-end retail, luxury apartments. It'll transform the area. Transform it how? Amora asked, studying the plans. Where do the current residents go? That's not really our concern. We buy the properties at market value, develop the land, create jobs. You displace communities, Amora interrupted. My grandmother lived in Riverside. Those properties are people's homes. Theodore's expression hardened. This is business, not charity. The Riverside project will generate $200 million in revenue. We can't kill it because of sentiment. Ethan looked at the renderings, then at Amora, then at his father. What if we redesigned it? Mixed-income housing instead of luxury only. Partner with the community instead of displacing it. It might take longer and make less profit. But it would be right, Amora finished. It would be financial suicide, Harrison Blackwell cut in. He'd been invited to this meeting as the board's representative. Our investors expect returns, not social experiments. Theodore, tell them this is absurd. Theodore was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Ethan and Amora. Finally, he spoke. It's not my decision anymore. Ethan's CEO in training. If he wants to redesign Riverside, that's his call. Harrison's face reddened. Theodore. I said it's his call. Theodore's voice carried the weight of 4 decades building an empire. Meeting adjourned. After the room cleared, Theodore remained seated, looking older and more tired than Amora had ever seen him. You're going to make enemies, he told Ethan quietly. The board, the investors, even some of the employees, they'll resist change. They'll call you weak, naive, too idealistic. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to defend me when they do? Ethan challenged. Theodore smiled faintly. I suppose we'll both find out. The redesign of the Riverside project became Ethan's first real test as incoming CEO. He assembled a team, urban planners, community organizers, architects who specialized in sustainable development. Amora found herself pulled into the process, her knowledge of the community invaluable. They held town halls in Riverside, listening to residents' concerns and incorporating their input. They partnered with local businesses instead of pushing them out. They created a development plan that preserved the neighborhood's character while still generating profit, just less of it than the original proposal. You're leaving $50 million on the table, Harrison Blackwell announced at the board meeting where Ethan presented the revised plans. For what? To feel good about yourselves. To build something sustainable, Ethan countered. The original plan would have generated huge profit in year 1, then nothing. This plan creates long-term value, for the company, for the community, for everyone involved. Long-term value doesn't pay dividends next quarter. No, but it ensures there are quarters after next quarter. Ethan's voice was steady. Wright Industries has been around for 3 generations. I'd like it to last 3 more. That requires thinking beyond the immediate return. The vote was close, 7-5 in favor of Ethan's plan. Harrison Blackwell stormed out of the boardroom, and Amora knew they'd made a powerful enemy. But in Riverside, something shifted. The community that had protested the original development embraced the revised one. Local news covered the story, Wright Industries' surprising change of heart. Business journals ran think pieces on whether corporate social responsibility could actually be profitable. And Ethan, standing in the middle of what would become the new Riverside Commons, looked at Amora with something like wonder. We did it. We actually did it. We did. She kissed him there, in the middle of the construction site, in the neighborhood where she'd learned what home meant. I'm proud of you. But victories in the corporate world came with prices. Harrison Blackwell launched a quiet campaign among the board members, suggesting Ethan was too inexperienced, too influenced by his bleeding heart wife, too soft to run Wright Industries. Rumors started circulating, that Theodore was losing his grip, that the company was being run by idealists, that investor confidence was shaking. The stock price dipped. Then Theodore collapsed during a board meeting. The doctors called it a cardiac event, his failing heart finally giving its most serious warning. He survived, but barely, and the recovery would be long. The board demanded answers. Who was running Wright Industries? Could Ethan handle it alone? Should they bring in an interim CEO? No. Theodore's voice was weak from his hospital bed, but his will was iron. Ethan takes over now. Full authority. Theodore, he's not ready, Harrison began. He's more ready than I was at his age. Theodore's eyes found Ethan's. And he's a better man than I ever was. The company is his. Just like that, at 29 years old, Ethan Wright became CEO of Wright Industries. The pressure was crushing. Ethan worked 16-hour days, learning systems, meeting with department heads, trying to prove he deserved the position. Amora tried to be supportive while maintaining her own job at the hospital. She'd refused to quit, needing something that was hers alone, but the balance was impossible. They started fighting. Small things at first: whose turn it was to pick up dinner, why he'd missed another date night, why she didn't understand the pressure he was under. But the small fights grew larger, fed by exhaustion and stress and the constant feeling that they were being pulled in different directions. "You're becoming him," Amora said one night after Ethan snapped at her for questioning a decision about employee healthcare. "You're becoming Theodore." "That's not fair. Isn't it? You're working yourself to death. You barely sleep. When was the last time we actually talked about something other than Wright Industries? When was the last time you supported me instead of criticizing?" Ethan's voice was sharp. "I'm trying to change an entire corporate culture while keeping the board from staging a coup. I need you on my side." "I am on your side. I'm just not on the side of you destroying yourself for a company that's already destroyed too much." The words hung between them like a chasm. "Maybe this was a mistake," Ethan said quietly. "Maybe you were right to be angry about the lie. Maybe we can't do this, can't bridge the gap between who I was and who I have to be now." Amora felt something crack in her chest. "Are you saying you want out? Of the job or the marriage?" "I don't know." His honesty was devastating. "I don't know anything anymore except that I'm failing at everything. The company, the board, us. I can't keep all the plates spinning." "Then put some down." Amora's voice broke. "Choose what matters, Ethan. Choose us." "I can't. 15,000 people depend on me. The Riverside Project, the community development initiatives we've started, the employees whose benefits I've improved. If I walk away, Harrison and the others will dismantle everything. It'll all have been for nothing." "And if you stay? If you keep sacrificing everything for Wright Industries? What happens to us then?" Ethan had no answer. Amora grabbed her coat. "I'm going to Jasmine's. I need space to think." "Amora, please." "Space, Ethan. Just space." She was halfway to the door when her phone rang. The hospital. Her shift supervisor's voice was urgent. "Amora, we have a situation. Chemical spill at a manufacturing plant, multiple pediatric casualties incoming. We need all hands on deck." "I'm on my way." She hung up, torn between her crumbling marriage and her duty. "Go," Ethan said quietly. "People need you." "Don't they always?" Amora replied, and left. The emergency room was chaos. 12 children, ages 5 to 14, all exposed to industrial chemicals from a factory accident. Amora moved on autopilot, the part of her that was a damn good nurse taking over even as the part that was a wife screamed in anguish. She was treating a 7-year-old girl, soothing her fears while administering treatment, when one of the other nurses mentioned the factory's name. Henderson Chemical. They supply materials to half the manufacturers in the state. Something clicked. Amora pulled out her phone during a brief break, searching. Henderson Chemical. Wright Industries was their biggest client. And according to the news alerts flooding her screen, Henderson had been cited multiple times for safety violations. Violations that Wright Industries' legal team had helped them fight. Violations that Theodore's administration had quietly supported because Henderson's low prices meant higher profit margins. Ethan had inherited more than a company. He'd inherited its sins. Amora's hands shook as she returned to her patient. How many other Hendersons were there? How much damage had Wright Industries done in the pursuit of profit? And how much of that would Ethan have to answer for now? Her phone buzzed. Ethan, just heard about the Henderson accident. I'm at the hospital. Where are you? She found him in the waiting room, still in his suit from the office, his face pale. Those kids, he said when he saw her. That little girl on the news, she's 5 years old. Henderson Chemical supplies us. We knew about the violations. My father's legal team fought every citation. We're responsible for this. Not you, Amora said, but the words felt hollow. Yes, me. I took over the company. I inherited the decisions. I'm responsible. He looked at her with eyes that had aged years in hours. Amora, I can't do this. I can't be the person who chooses profit over children's safety. I can't become the kind of man who lets something like this happen. So don't. She took his hands. Fix it. That's why you took this job, remember? To make Wright Industries better. So make it better. Audit every supplier. Implement safety standards. Fire anyone who prioritizes profit over people. You have the power now. Use it. Harrison and the board will fight me on every change. The costs will be enormous. We might lose major contracts. Then lose them. Amora's voice echoed in the waiting room. Some things matter more than money. You know that. You've always known that. Don't let Theodore's world make you forget. Ethan pulled her close, and she felt him shaking. I'm so scared I'm going to fail. Fail those kids, fail the employees, fail you. You're not going to fail me. Amora held him tighter. But you have to choose, Ethan. Not between me and the company, between the man Theodore was and the man you want to be. You can run Wright Industries, but only if you run it your way. No compromises on safety. No looking the other way. No sacrificing people for profit. That's the only way this works. It might destroy the company. Better a destroyed company than a destroyed soul. They stood there in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by worried families and the antiseptic smell of fear and hope, and made their choice. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency board meeting. Effective immediately, Wright Industries is cutting all contracts with any supplier that has outstanding safety violations, he announced. We're implementing a comprehensive audit of every partner company, with safety and ethical standards that must be met or the partnership ends. This will cost us approximately $80 million in the short term and may impact quarterly profits for the next 2 years. Harrison Blackwell stood so fast his chair fell backward. You can't make this decision unilaterally. The board can vote me out if you want, Ethan interrupted. But I'm CEO, and this is my decision. Those children in the hospital right now are there because Wright Industries valued profit over safety. That ends today. Theodore built this company on pragmatism, not naive idealism. Theodore built this company on the backs of people he considered expendable. I won't continue that legacy. Ethan's voice was steel. If Wright Industries can't survive doing the right thing, then maybe it doesn't deserve to survive. The room erupted. Board members argued, shouted, demanded. But when the vote came, it was 8-4 in Ethan's favor. Narrow, but enough. Harrison Blackwell resigned on the spot. You're destroying everything Theodore built, he spat on his way out. No, Amora said from where she stood against the wall, having been invited to observe. He's building something better. The months that followed were brutal. Stock prices dropped. Investors complained. 3 board members who'd voted with Harrison threatened resignation. The business press declared Ethan's leadership questionable at best, disastrous at worst. But something else happened too. Employee morale at Wright Industries soared. Workers who'd felt like cogs in a machine suddenly felt valued. The new supplier standards meant safer products, which meant fewer liability issues. The Riverside project opened to massive community support, generating positive press that money couldn't buy. And slowly, gradually, the stock price began to recover. Theodore, recovering at home with round-the-clock care, watched it all from the sidelines. Amora visited him once a week, an unlikely friendship forming between the dying billionaire and the nurse he tried to manipulate. You were right about him, Theodore said one afternoon, his voice weak but his eyes sharp. He's better than me. Better than I ever could have been. He learned from your mistakes, Amora replied. That's all any child can do. I have regrets. Theodore's gaze drifted to the window. So many regrets. But bringing Ethan back, getting to see him become the man he was meant to be, that's not one of them. Tell him that, Amora urged. While you still can. Theodore was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how. Start with I'm proud of you. It's not complicated. But words, Amora had learned, were the hardest things for men like Theodore Wright. He died 3 weeks later, surrounded by expensive medical equipment and not much else, taking his pride and his regrets with him. Ethan cried at the funeral, not for the father Theodore had been, but for the father he could have been. Amora held him through it. This man she'd married for love and nearly lost to legacy, and knew they'd survived something that destroyed most couples. They'd survived the truth. 6 months after Theodore's death, Amora stood in the lobby of Wright Industries headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown, and still felt like an imposter. She'd been here dozens of times now, but the security guards who greeted her by name, the employees who nodded respectfully as she passed, the elevator that required a special key to reach the executive floor, none of it felt real. What felt real was the tiny apartment above the laundromat that she and Ethan still called home, despite the board's continued protests. The CEO of Wright Industries living in a one-bedroom walk-up is terrible optics, the new board chair, a pragmatic woman named Margaret Santos, had said more than once. Then I guess we're terrible at optics, Ethan always replied. Today, Amora was here for the dedication ceremony of the Riverside Commons, the mixed-use development that had nearly destroyed Ethan's career before it saved it. The project had been completed on time and, miraculously, under budget. More importantly, it had become a model for ethical development that other companies were starting to emulate. She found Ethan in his office, Theodore's old office, though Ethan had stripped it of the heavy leather and dark wood, replacing them with light, open spaces, and windows that actually opened. He was on the phone, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking more like the mechanic she'd married than a billionaire CEO. I understand the investor concerns, Margaret, but we're not cutting the childcare subsidies. If they want their returns, they'll get them, just not at the expense of our employees' families. He paused, listening. Then we'll find new investors. I'm not negotiating on this. Another pause. Good. I'll see you at the ceremony. He hung up and finally noticed Amora in the doorway. His face transformed, the CEO mask falling away to reveal her husband underneath. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to hear you be terrifyingly competent. She moved into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of him, coffee and the mint soap he used, the expensive cologne the board had suggested he wear, barely masking what was essentially still Ethan. You ready for your big speech? Terrified, actually. He held her close. What if I mess it up? What if I say something stupid and undo all the goodwill we've built? Then you'll apologize and fix it, like you always do. Amora pulled back to look at him. You know what I realized the other day? You're a better CEO than Theodore ever was, not despite your compassion, but because of it. You see people, Ethan. That's your superpower. My superpower is having you. He kissed her softly. I couldn't do any of this without you, you know that, right? You could. You'd just be miserable and impossible to live with. Accurate. They stood there in the corner office overlooking the city, a view that still took Amora's breath away, and she felt the rightness of this moment. Not the money or the power or the prestige, but this, being known completely by another person and loved anyway. We should go, Ethan said reluctantly. The car's waiting. One of 17 cars, Amora teased. Which obscenely expensive vehicle are we taking today? The hybrid. Because we're environmentally conscious billionaires. You're a billionaire. I'm a nurse who married up. Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her with sudden seriousness. Amora Bennett Wright. You didn't marry up. You married exactly who you thought you married, a mechanic who happened to have a complicated relationship with money. The bank account changed. I didn't. I know. She squeezed his hand. I was just testing to see if you knew. The Riverside Commons dedication ceremony was held in the Central Plaza, a beautiful open space with local art installations, benches made by neighborhood craftsmen, and a fountain that children were already playing in despite the October chill. The crowd was a mix of Riverside residents, Wright Industries employees, local politicians, and press. Amora stood off to the side as Ethan took the podium, nervous energy radiating from him despite his calm exterior. She caught his eye and smiled, mouthing, "You've got this." Thank you all for coming, Ethan began, his voice carrying across the plaza. 6 months ago, this space was a parking lot and a collection of abandoned buildings. The original plan for this site would have turned it into luxury apartments and high-end retail that most Riverside residents couldn't afford. It would have been profitable. It would have been good businesses by traditional standards. But it would have been wrong. He paused, and Amora saw him doing what he always did, searching the crowd for real people, real faces, reminding himself why this mattered. My father, Theodore Wright, built Wright Industries on a simple philosophy: profit first, everything else second. For 3 decades, that philosophy made money. It also made enemies. It displaced communities, exploited workers, and prioritized shareholders over human beings. When I took over as CEO, I inherited that legacy, and the responsibility to change it. A ripple went through the business press section. This wasn't the typical corporate platitudes they were expecting. Riverside Commons represents a different philosophy: people first, profit second. We partnered with the community instead of displacing it. We hired local contractors. We included affordable housing alongside market rate units. We preserved local businesses instead of replacing them with chains. And you know what? We still made money. Not as much as the original plan would have generated, but enough to prove that ethical development is possible. Applause broke out from the Riverside residents. Amora saw Mrs. Patterson, her grandmother's old friend, wiping tears from her eyes. I'm not going to stand here and claim Wright Industries is perfect now, Ethan continued. We're not. We're still learning, still making mistakes, still figuring out how to balance profitability with responsibility. But we're trying. And we're committed to continuing to try, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when people tell us we're naive or idealistic. He found Amora in the crowd again, and his voice softened. I used to think running away from wealth was the only way to maintain integrity. I spent 8 years living as a mechanic, rejecting everything my father built, convinced that money and morality couldn't coexist. And then I married a woman who taught me something crucial: it's not about how much you have, it's about what you do with it. Amora felt tears prick her eyes as everyone turned to look at her. My wife, Amora, grew up in Riverside. She knows what it means to struggle, to work 2 jobs, to choose between bills and groceries. When she found out who I really was, that I'd hidden my background, my family, my wealth, she had every right to leave. Instead, she challenged me to use my position to actually make a difference. To stop running from responsibility and start embracing it. Ethan's voice grew stronger. Riverside Commons exists because of her. The new supplier safety standards at Wright Industries exist because of her. The childcare subsidies, the increased wages, the community investment programs, all of that happened because she refused to let me forget that corporations are made of people, and people deserve dignity. The crowd erupted in applause. Amora wanted to disappear, overwhelmed by the attention, but Jasmine, standing next to her with her phone out, recording everything, grabbed her arm. Girl, let him celebrate you, Jasmine whispered. You earned this. Ethan continued his speech, talking about the specific features of Riverside Commons, thanking the community partners and Wright Industries employees who'd made it possible. But Amora barely heard it, still processing the public declaration of her influence, her importance, her worth. When the speech ended and the ribbon was cut, Ethan insisted Mrs. Patterson do the honors. The crowd dispersed into celebration. Local bands played. Food trucks served neighborhood favorites. Children ran through the plaza like it had always been theirs. Amora found a quiet corner near the fountain, needing a moment to breathe. She was watching a little girl, maybe 7 years old, with beaded braids and a sunshine smile, dance to the music when Ethan appeared beside her. You okay? That was a lot. Too much? I'm sorry, I should have warned you I was going to. Ethan. She turned to face him. It was perfect. Overwhelming, but perfect. He relaxed slightly. I meant every word. You know that, right? This, he gestured to the plaza, the people, the community thriving around them. This is only possible because you wouldn't let me take the easy way out. We did this together. Amora leaned against him. That's what marriage is, right? Making each other better. If that's the metric, you're winning by a landslide. They stood there watching the celebration, and Amora felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that had been missing during the chaotic months of transition. This was what wealth could do when wielded with intention. This was what love could build when founded on truth. Mrs. Wright. A voice interrupted their moment. Amora turned to find a young woman in her early 20s, holding a baby. I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you. I'm one of the families who got into the affordable housing units here. Before this, I was couch surfing with my daughter, trying to save enough for first and last month's rent somewhere. Because of this project, we have a home. A real home. Amora's throat tightened. What's your name? Destiny. And this is Aliyah. She adjusted the baby in her arms. I work at the coffee shop downstairs. They're training me to be a manager. I'm taking online business classes at night. My daughter has a safe place to grow up. And it's because you and Mr. Wright actually gave a damn about people like me. Thank you for telling us, Ethan said quietly. Stories like yours, they're why we do this work. After Destiny left, Amora turned to Ethan with tears streaming down her face. That right there. That's worth everything. The fights with the board, the bad press, all of it. Yeah, Ethan agreed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. It really is. That evening, back in their tiny apartment, the one they'd stubbornly refused to leave despite the board's protests, despite Theodore's arguments, despite every logical reason to move somewhere appropriate for the CEO of Wright Industries, Amora and Ethan collapsed onto their second-hand couch with Chinese takeout and exhausted contentment. Today was good, Amora said, stealing a dumpling from Ethan's container. Today was terrifying. But yes, also good. He caught her hand, examining her fingers. Still no engagement ring upgrade, I see. Still don't want one. Amora looked at the simple silver band he'd proposed with, the one that had cost a week's salary from his mechanic job. This ring represents the man I fell in love with. That man is worth more than any diamond. You know I could buy you literally any ring in the world now, right? Like, we could purchase a small diamond mine if you wanted. Please don't purchase a diamond mine. But what if I really wanted to? She laughed, and he pulled her close, and they lay there in their cramped apartment that smelled like Chinese food and motor oil. Some habits died hard, and felt richer than any amount of money could make them. I've been thinking, Ethan said after a while, about the future. About what we want. Should I be worried? I want to start a foundation. A real one, not just a tax write-off. Something focused on community development, affordable housing, education access. I want you to run it. Amora sat up. What? You're the one who knows what communities actually need. You've lived it. And you have this gift for seeing people, really seeing them, the way I never learned to until I met you. Ethan was serious now. I can run Wright Industries. But the foundation, the part that actually changes lives, that should be yours. Ethan, I'm a nurse. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You're a nurse who works 2 jobs, volunteers at a shelter, supports a family, and somehow still has energy to call me on my bullshit. You're exactly who should run it. He took her hand. And besides, we'd hire people who know the technical stuff. You'd be the vision. The heart. Amora's mind spun with possibilities. I'd want to focus on healthcare access. Pediatric care especially. And education. Scholarships for kids who wouldn't otherwise have a chance. And support for working mothers trying to finish their education. So that's a yes. That's a let me think about it for more than 30 seconds. But she was already thinking about it, about the resources she'd have to actually help people, about the difference she could make with right money guided by Bennett values. About building something that honored both her grandmother's legacy and the life she'd built with Ethan. Okay, she said finally. Yes. Let's do it. Ethan's smile was brilliant. The Bennett Wright Foundation. Has a nice ring to it. Very presumptuous. Putting my name first. Your foundation. Your name goes first. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like soy sauce and promise, there in their tiny apartment that had witnessed every stage of their transformation, from newlyweds to survivors of truth to partners in purpose. 3 months later, Amora stood in front of a room full of community organizers, healthcare workers, and education advocates, presenting the Bennett Wright Foundation's first initiative, a comprehensive support program for single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. We're calling it the Destiny Project, she explained, the irony of the name not lost on her. Named for a young mother I met who was given a chance and ran with it. The program provides childcare subsidies, tuition assistance, housing support, and career mentorship. Our goal is to help 500 families in the first year, scaling up from there. The presentation went well. Questions were asked, partnerships were proposed, excitement rippled through the room. But what Amora would remember most was the moment afterward, when a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "I'm a single mom working 3 jobs to put myself through nursing school," the woman said. "Programs like this, they're why people like me can even dream of something better. Thank you." Amora hugged her, this stranger who could have been her, and felt the weight of responsibility and privilege and purpose settle more firmly on her shoulders. That night, she came home to find Ethan at their kitchen table, still in their apartment, still stubbornly refusing to move, working on financial projections for Wright Industries' next ethical development project. "How'd the presentation go?" he asked, looking up. "I cried twice, forgot half my notes, and accidentally said this is terrifying instead of this is exciting at one point." "So, perfect." "Apparently." She dropped into the chair across from him. "Ethan, what are we doing? A year ago, we were budgeting for groceries. Now we're running a billion-dollar company and a charitable foundation. How did this become our life?" "Honestly, I have no idea." He closed his laptop. "But I know I'd rather be doing this with you than living simply without you. The money doesn't matter. The foundation, the company, they're just tools. You're the point." That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. "I'm full of surprises." "You're full of something." They grinned at each other across the tiny table in their tiny kitchen, and Amora felt the truth of it. They'd survived the revelation, the transformation, the pressure of becoming people they'd never planned to be. They'd survived because they decided, over and over, in small moments and crisis points, that the marriage mattered more than the money, that truth mattered more than comfort, that who they were together mattered more than who the world thought they should be. "I love you," Amora said simply. "I love you too." Ethan reached across the table. "And I promise, no more secrets. No more hidden billionaire relatives or surprise inheritances or your mother." Amora sat up suddenly. "Your mother in France. We never talked about her. Is she?" "She's fine. We've been emailing, actually. She's coming to visit next month." Ethan looked sheepish. "I was going to tell you. That's not a secret. Just poor timing on the announcement." "Ethan, right. If your mother shows up and she's actually the Queen of England or something. She's an art teacher in Marseille who grows tomatoes and has 3 cats. I promise, no more surprises. I'm holding you to that." A year after the Riverside Commons dedication, Wright Industries was featured in Business Weekly with the headline, "Can Conscious Capitalism Save Corporate America?" The article detailed Ethan's transformation of the company, the initial resistance from investors, and the surprising long-term profitability of ethical business practices. Wright Industries under Ethan Wright has proved the skeptics wrong, the article concluded. Treating employees well, investing in communities, and prioritizing safety over shortcuts hasn't just been the right thing to do, it's been good business. Other companies are taking notice. The Wright model may be the future of corporate responsibility. Amora read the article on her lunch break at the hospital. She'd kept her nursing job, scaling back to 3 shifts a week but refusing to quit entirely. The work kept her grounded, reminded her why the foundation mattered, connected her to the reality that wealth could insulate her from if she wasn't careful. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Did you see the article? We're a model apparently. Amora, don't let it go to your head. You're still the guy who can't remember where he puts his keys." Ethan, harsh but fair. "Dinner tonight? Our place, or should we finally use that reservation at the fancy restaurant I've been trying to get you to?" Amora, "Our place. You're cooking. Our couch. That's the real luxury." Ethan, "See, this is why I love you. Most people married to a billionaire would want the fancy restaurant." Amora, "Most people married to a billionaire didn't fall in love with him when he was a mechanic in a worn t-shirt who smelled like motor oil." Ethan, "I can still smell like motor oil if that's what you're into." Amora laughed out loud, earning curious looks from the other nurses in the break room. She pocketed her phone and returned to work, to the children who needed her, to the life that was hers not because of wealth or status but because she'd chosen it. That evening, true to his word, Ethan cooked dinner in their tiny kitchen. Pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, the kind of meal they'd shared 100 times before everything changed. They ate on the couch, watching a documentary about urban planning, arguing good-naturedly about development strategies and the best ways to preserve community character. "You know what's funny?" Amora said during a commercial break. "If you told me the truth from the beginning, that you were Theodore Wright's son, that you'd walked away from Billions, that you had this whole complicated past, I probably still would have fallen for you." "Really? Really?" "Because the man I fell in love with was the one who showed up. The one who read books in diners and explained carburetors and saw me as complete exactly as I was. That man would have been worth loving whether he was a mechanic or a billionaire or anything in between." Ethan set down his plate, pulling her close. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you with the truth sooner. I'm sorry I let fear make that decision instead of faith. I forgive you." The words came easily now, earned through a year of proving that Ethan was still Ethan, that the money was a complication but not a transformation. "And I'm sorry I almost let pride make me walk away. We both could have handled things better. We're works in progress. Expensive works in progress. The most expensive." They kissed there on their second-hand couch in their tiny apartment they defended against all reason, and Amora thought about the journey they'd taken, from lies to truth, from poverty to wealth, from strangers to partners in every sense of the word. The money had changed their circumstances, but not their core. They were still the same people who'd fallen in love over coffee and conversation, who'd married in thrift store clothes because love was more important than pageantry, who'd chosen each other over and over despite every reason to walk away. Some stories ended with the revelation of wealth. Theirs had just been beginning. 2 years later, the Bennett Wright Foundation's annual gala was held at Wright Industries headquarters, a decision Amora had insisted on. "If we're celebrating our work, we should do it in the place that funds it," she'd argued, and Ethan had agreed. The top floor had been transformed for the occasion, elegant but not ostentatious, with displays highlighting the foundation's impact. 2,000 families housed, 500 mothers through education programs, 10,000 children receiving healthcare access, 3 new community centers built. But Amora's favorite part of the evening was the speakers, actual people whose lives had been changed. Destiny, who now managed 3 coffee shops and was working on her business degree. Marcus, a young man named after Ethan's lost friend, who'd received a foundation scholarship and was studying engineering. Mrs. Patterson, whose church had been preserved and renovated as part of a community investment program. "These are the returns that matter," Amora said in her remarks to the room full of donors and board members and community partners. "Not the dollars, though we're grateful for those. But the lives changed, the hope restored, the dignity affirmed. That's what the Bennett Wright Foundation exists to create." The applause was thunderous. Ethan, standing off to the side, looked at his wife with undisguised pride and love. After the formal program, as the party continued around them, they found a quiet corner near the windows overlooking the city, the same view from Ethan's office, but softened by evening light and celebration. "You know what I realized today?" Amora said, leaning into Ethan's shoulder. "This is the life we were meant to build. Not the one I thought we had when you were just a mechanic, and not the one your father built. Something new. Something ours. Built on truth," Ethan added. "Even when the truth was hard. Especially when the truth was hard." They stood there together, watching their city, their foundation, their life spread out below them. In Amora's purse was a pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, positive, though she hadn't told Ethan yet. She was waiting for the right moment, wanting to savor the secret just a little longer before their world expanded again. But she would tell him tonight, she decided. No more secrets, no matter how happy. Just truth, and trust, and the life they were building one honest moment at a time. "Ready to go home?" Ethan asked eventually. "To our tiny apartment." "To our tiny, perfect, inexplicably defended apartment, yes. Always." She took his hand. "Let's go home." They left the gala early, the CEO of Wright Industries and his nurse wife, the billionaire and the woman who'd married a mechanic, the 2 people who'd learned that the richest life was one built on truth, love, and the courage to choose each other over and over again. In the car on the way home, Amora squeezed Ethan's hand. "I have something to tell you." He looked at her, those grey-blue eyes that had first caught her attention in a diner so long ago, and waited. "We're going to need a bigger apartment," she said softly. "Maybe not a mansion, but bigger." It took him exactly 3 seconds to understand. His face transformed, shock to joy to wonder to something so pure and overwhelming that tears sprang to his eyes. Really? His voice cracked. Really? He kissed her there in the back of the car, gentle and reverent, and Amora felt the rightness of this moment, this life, this love, this future they were building together. They'd started with a lie, survived the truth, and built something real from the ruins. They'd learned that wealth measured in love was worth more than wealth measured in dollars, that home was wherever they chose each other, and that the best inheritance wasn't money but integrity. And now they would pass that forward to a new generation, teaching their child that people mattered more than profit, that truth was the foundation of love, and that sometimes the greatest wealth came disguised as a mechanic in a diner, offering honest work and an honest heart. The car pulled up to their apartment building, the laundromat humming below, their tiny home waiting above. Soon they'd need something larger. But for now, this was perfect. "I love you," Ethan said, helping her out of the car. "You and our baby. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Amora replied, leading him toward home. "That means you're paying attention." They climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, wealthy beyond measure and exactly where they were meant to be. The story of Amora and Ethan proves that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in trust, integrity, and love built on honest foundations. Sometimes the richest life comes from choosing truth over comfort, people over profit, and each other over everything else. Thank you for experiencing this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it.